Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and today we're reviewing Fantastic Four X-Men number 4. So this should be a fun review. I quite enjoyed this book overall. We reviewed and did a full recap of the first issue of this series, but didn't really get a chance to talk about the rest of the series, but I had been following it. And then the fourth book, at least the print edition, got delayed by a very long time, all the way until here, right at the end of July, pretty much. So, this is like the rest of the series, with Chip Zdarsky writing, Terry Dodson doing penciling, Rachel Dodson and Ransom Getty doing the inks, and Laura Martin doing coloring, and then Joe Caramagna doing lettering. Just like the rest of the series, I really like the Dodsons' artwork. They're a good team and work well with the rest of the art crew to just tell a nice, colorful, and fun X-Men story, right? My instinct was to start showing off pages, but I've kind of rigged off some of the preview images to sort of show it as I talk, which I think, based on some of the feedback we got from last week's reviews, was for the best. On the whole, it's a fun book. I'm going to actually kind of go through what happens a bit, and I'm going to need the book to help me through it because there's a lot, and maybe we'll start with the beginning. So the whole plot of this mini-series is that Franklin Richards is a mutant. He's really the only mutant character among the Fantastic Four, I guess. They're otherwise considered slightly different, and just because in Franklin's case he was born that way. And his powers, since the Fantastic Four returned, are waning, and every time he uses them, they're draining slightly, and there's a lot of concern that when he uses up all his powers, they're going to kill him. So that kind of leads to conflict with the X-Men and all of their new stuff going on with Krakoa, because they want to bring Franklin in. They not only believe they can help him, but that he would be a very powerful asset for the X-Men. Like, very unapologetically, they are self-motivated in all of this, and they do want to use Franklin as much as they do care about him and are concerned about him. So that leads to conflict with the Fantastic Four, most especially Sue Storm and Reed Richards, including a pretty bleak moment where Reed Richards uses a device to basically mask his son's own mutant genes so he can't travel through the gates to Krakoa, which is concerning on several levels. It was done without his son's consent. No one else in the family knew about it. The entire X-Men crew is deeply uncomfortable with the whole thing, and that basically drives the central conflict in all of this. And as a result, Franklin and his sister Valeria ultimately flee the Fantastic Four and the X-Men and kind of just stow away on Kitty Pryde's ship. She's a marauder. I'm guessing the events in Marauder haven't fully spelled out yet, and I was hoping for some kind of acknowledgement of that, or hope that perhaps Kitty Pryde lives on, but right now I haven't gotten that, and I'm pretty sure I'm caught up on Marauders, so we'll just have to wait and see on all of that. But regardless, they end up, Kitty Pryde and the Richards kids, encountering doom, as it were. Kitty was seeking out some mutants that were being held on this island that is owned by Latveria, where Doom had basically been keeping all the mutants and had been messing with them mentally. It all ends with a situation where Doom gets one of his own mutants killed just so that he can use it as grounds to just unleash on the Fantastic Four and the X-Men while he's trying to restore Franklin Richards' power, because he has his own motivations that this book gets into. So that's basically what's happened in the miniseries so far. We might still do a recap of those issues one day, but that's just a little bit of backstory for those of you who haven't read all these issues. And that opens basically with, as it's showing on screen right now, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four at war with Latveria and these Sentinel-style Doom bots that Doom has a great little moment where he talks about how it's like, oh, they're much more powerful than like a regular Sentinel, and they target indiscriminately between humans and mutants, just anyone who's a enemy of Latveria. Good times. Doom is his usual powerful self. he has this amazing moment where Kitty Pryde manages to break through this shield, and Doom just sort of futzes with her powers for a second and sends her plummeting into the earth by increasing her density. Something that like Kitty Pryde maybe could do, but like I don't, it's not really a regular part of her power usage and stuff. And like he says, oh, I know my powers, I know your powers better than you. And he's, he's Doom, and he's fully fledged in this book, and not at all like, because there's a way you could restrict him or like pull him back to a degree or not live up to the name. This book doesn't do that. Doom is totally on point in here, and kind of reminds me of like his ongoing solo series that's like up for an Eisner Award right now. And there's a great line that Kurt Wagner, our old Level of Pound Nightcrawler, has, where he talks about how great it is when the Fantastic Four and X-Men work together. So, they were conflicting throughout the series, and now they've come together in this final issue, and it's a good feeling. This is all simple crossover series stuff, but it doesn't have to be elaborate or fancy or whatever. I'm an easy sell if everything's working well, and that's absolutely how I feel in this moment. So that goes on. Kitty manages to get back to Franklin because she's awesome and takes control of her powers, and asks him what he wants, and he says he wants to basically be with his mom. His powers explode everywhere and just destroy all the Doombots, and Franklin saves the day, which is a great ending to the whole climax of the story, we'll say. But then a holographic Doom sort of floats in on the gathered team of X-Men and Fantastic Four and just tears them out. He has this like a bunch of great lines about like how it's like, oh, like you and your superiority, this is all nonsense. I'm the one in charge. This is my country. And you are in Latveria. You are breaking so many laws. Like, get out or I will contact the international community. It goes on for like 2 pages. But Xavier doesn't back down and just stands up to him and just says, your story is completely hollow. You captured our mutants and put them in armor. You tampered with the minds of your own mutants, so we're taking them and they will live on Krakoa. And like that's it, no more deaths. Like, you orchestrated the death of that mutant. He just calls him out on everything. Doom gets quiet and just obliges and just says like, all right, maybe they'll teach you some common sense, which is also a great line. And then Doom's hologram disappears and he goes on because he's not even there to physically confront them. He knows that might be a bad idea. Like, it's Doom. He's not going to get caught in that situation. So then basically the X-Men and the Fantastic Four reach a bit of a compromise. Franklin agrees to spend some time on Krakoa, and they notice that his powers don't drain as much on the island compared to when he's out and about in the world, but his powers are still like an issue. And that's relevant because, and important because that's like still a plot point over in Empire right now, which we will be talking about in another review later this week, or hopefully today. That's pretty much the end of the story. There's a great scene where Valeria, always the little schemer, and with just across so many years and so many different writers, she has the best relationship with Doom. She gives him a call and notices that he did have his technology designed to siphon some of Franklin's powers, and asks what he's up to. And he says, well, the mutants are kind of evolution's answer to like humanity needing to improve itself with its own intelligence, and he's taking that to heart a bit. And it's the way I take that is, oh well, he's going to be interested in using that power to further enhance himself, which isn't even as powerful as Doom's ever been, but that's still interesting because Franklin ain't weak. And then it establishes a new status quo, like Xavier and Magneto bring Franklin back home after he spends some time on Krakoa, and they kind of greet the Fantastic Four, and it's this nice happy moment. And then Magneto and Xavier go into Reed Richards' lab, and they confront him about the device he made that basically masks mutant powers as humans and disables their abilities, and they call him out on it, and they're like, you're just like, he's a genius, but he's also just so dumb, is basically what Xavier says. He takes off that helmet thing that he always wears now and just, once again, This story is full of these long, extended little bits of dialogue that are just so well written and so interesting. And he's like, I'll say some of it. Like Xavier's like, you crossed a line, Reed, against your son, against all mutants, and he wipes out Reed's ability to ever make that device again or ever like possibly reassemble that knowledge in his brain. They destroy the existing device, and he's like, this is a mercy. If this was back in our Illuminati days, I would have wiped out your memory of this whole thing, which is accurate. But he says like, I want you to remember you. And Magneto kind of chimes in and he says like, you don't get to do whatever you want anymore, Richards. Your wild, unchecked actions are now being checked. Welcome to the new world. And they leave. And that's awesome. That's the end. And it even has this cool little bit at the end where look, we get these notes about Reed Richards' observations of Krakoa and thoughts on all these changes and stuff. And the last one's about the device that masks human genes. And it shows the complete entry, and then it shows the entry damaged and erased. Not like fully, but just enough that, you know, Reed Richards wouldn't be able to figure it out again. And that's the end of this very awesome miniseries. So a few thoughts on it all. Zardsky's a great writer. This was he's good at. I think he's more known for comedy, but these days with him writing Daredevil and this series, like he can do serious really well. And this isn't like a super serious series or anything, but it's really well put together. I loved all the characters, even like a character like Nightcrawler really has a small role in this story, but it was fun and meaningful for the characters. So even smaller characters relative to the role of the story had good moments. And then the main thrust of the story, Doom, Reed Richards, Franklin and Valeria, they were all great. And Zardsky had such a great handling of it all. Tevye is saying, I personally thought the story was a tons of fun, but that ending was really disappointing. Well, that's interesting. I thought it was great. I thought it wrapped things up nicely. I was hoping for maybe some answers or thoughts going forward about what's going to happen with Franklin or what's going on with Kitty Pryde and where this story takes place in the continuity of it all that, but it just seems like it's before a lot of stuff that goes down with her and Marauders and before Empire and all that stuff, which is fine. But yeah, that was a little disappointing, and I wish that was acknowledged or explained somehow because I really like Kitty Pryde, and for those of you reading Marauders, like she's supposed to be dead right now, so I don't know what the story is by that. I have a feeling, hopefully, Kitty Pryde will return somehow someday, but I don't really know. Tevye is saying what Professor X and Magneto did with Reed Richards was super creepy. I thought it was so on brand with their Krakoan style and stuff, and they're not all sunshine and lollipops, and I don't know, I kind of like it. It's an interesting tone that they've taken with all this stuff. There's a huge sinister overtone to everything, to a degree, and I've always kind of thought it was like this weird sense of dread, and maybe I don't know what to make of it. I always thought that it was like, well, like maybe this Krakoan stuff doesn't last forever, but the longer this goes, the more Marvel seems committed to all of this cool Krakoa stuff, and that's great if true. But I don't know what the plan is with that or where they're going with that sort of thing. But I liked how they didn't just let Reed Richards get away with that, because he kind of did get away with that in the series. Family got mad at him, and they kind of got over it, and that was that. I like that. I like that this is basically a book of just people calling each other out. Doom making some valid points about the terrible behavior of various characters in this story. Reed Richards being called out by Xavier, and then Xavier also calling out Doom. Xavier in particular is great in this book. It was well written dialogue. It was not just like, oh, we're just throwing around drama. These were earned character moments, appropriately written to each character, and really cool when we think about how Zardsky hasn't written a lot of these characters before. I think I said this before, but I'm gonna swing back around to it if I didn't really say it again. I really, truly wish Zardsky was the writer of the Fantastic Four. That feels especially relevant now that we're talking more about the Fantastic Four under Dan Slott for Empire, and I've found it mediocre at best, whereas this is so on point, and I was so excited to read this book, and really happy that this is the one I wound up doing the review of first out of what I pulled this week. It's another pretty big week of Marvel stuff and one DC book, but this one ended up being what I went with first, and I quite enjoyed this book and would recommend the whole series. Given the nature of the pandemic, if you don't have the first couple issues or so, I definitely recommend just waiting around for the trade. It probably won't be that long, and it's worth owning. This was fun. It's not like super impactful. It is pretty short, but it's sweet and sincere. It leaves room for more stories going forward without feeling like sequel bait. There's a lot I liked about it overall. Yeah, that being said, I wouldn't be spending an arm and a leg on these sort of books either. They're fun. They weren't like out of the park amazing. I say that a little cautiously. I really like this series. I just like now that I think about it, it's like, well, there was only so much to it. A lot of fun moments, not a ton of meat to this story, if you know what I mean. Like there, I kind of see what Tevye is saying about it being disappointing. You have to remember these reviews are always fresh nowadays because of the way we're doing them with the live streams. Basically, I read them and then I hop on to air as quickly as possible while giving you guys a little bit of clearance time. So I don't have that little bit of hindsight I sometimes try to get for these books. And there isn't a lot of substance because, yeah, the whole thrust of this story is about Franklin Richards' unstable powers, and that doesn't actually get resolved at the end of this story. There's conflict with Doom. That kind of gets resolved at the end of the story, but like I said, it's kind of leaving things open. I guess I enjoyed the ride enough that it was fun on its own, but that is an issue. If you're looking for something substantive, this is just 4 issues. It's just a little bit of fun, it's a bit of character work. It's an interesting acknowledgement of the relative relationship between the Fantastic Four and the X-Men right now, and just how the rest of the world views the X-Men, and all their changes with the Krakoan stuff. I think that will be interesting going forward. Hopefully Marvel is smart and resists having some sort of crazy war between the X-Men and the Inhumans or the Avengers or the Fantastic Four again. While it would certainly feel more warranted compared to some of the other X-Men wars that have happened in the past, we really don't need to see that again. We've gotten so much of it at this point. But I do want to see them do something with this going forward. It would be cool to see how the Avengers and all those other heroes have to interact and work with the X-Men in some big crossover like that. And that seems like something worth doing at some point. Right now, we're doing something big between the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, and that's fine. We haven't gotten that in a long time, so that's great, to be honest. But going forward, yeah, I would like to see that. I mean, we don't need a rush for a Marvel event, but I think there's so much with Krakoa that it can certainly be explored. Tevye said, yeah, we need a break from X-Men versus everybody. Yeah, then that's Marvel's fault for hitting that idea on too much in the past, too recently. Because all of this Krakoa stuff would make for a really interesting X-Men versus Avengers story. It would have been better set up than all that Phoenix stuff from the actual X-Men versus Avengers story. That, we've talked a lot about how Civil War 2 was just a mess, but if you wanted to do a sequel of something, that might be worth doing one day. But let's say, how about we do that like 5 years from now? That would be great, right? We can wait 5 years. That gives us plenty of time to explore this Krakoa stuff. And by then, I would be up for like X-Men versus Avengers 2 and just surround it with all this Krakoa stuff. I'm sure someone on Krakoa is going to cross some line at some point in a way that the Avengers just can't ignore. In some ways, I think they're ignoring a lot right now. Maybe deliberately. Obviously, it's done just because there's different publishing houses within Marvel, but, that's where series like this are kind of fun and can be useful if they have a little bit more to them. But like I said, I don't know. It was fun character work. I don't really go into a Zardsky book expecting like, oh, we're gonna have a big, epic, over-the-top event. This was just a fun read, and I did like it, and I still think I recommend it. You should just know what you're in for. This is just a colorful, fun book, and a nice experience to read. I'm an easy sell when it comes to stuff with like Valeria too, and her being able to assess things that Doom does and seeing things that no one else in her family does. That stuff's all great to me, and Starsky did that really well. That's why I'm saying like, oh man, I really wish like he feels like he would be the perfect Fantastic Four writer compared to Dan Slott, who's not a terrible Fantastic Four writer, but not the best, and Starsky just feels so much better. I'm so sick of Dan Slott and everything. I didn't want to be like poo-pooing another series, but that's just so prevalent in this. Maybe that's why it leaves me excited about it, because it's like, oh, this is what I want to get out of the Fantastic Four more than I do out of Dan Slott's books. So, all right, I think we'll call it there. Um, yeah, Debbie's just kind of echoing what I'm saying. Thanks for joining me and chatting with me on the live chat, Tevya. Tevya saying we need a break from Dan Slott. Yeah, Marvel and DC really need to stop doing that. They reward mediocrity in this weird way where you can just keep making these books. And I guess they sell a certain amount and enough that it doesn't matter, but that's why we all gotta vote with our wallet a little bit and control these things where we can. I'm a reviewer. I have to review these things. I don't have to, but I review these things to give you guys a recommendation, but you should, you know, take that into account. And when I'm talking about like some random series, like the Harleen Black Label stuff that do showcase different writers and artists, buying that stuff goes a long way to helping this along. And heck, even X-Men Fantastic Four, better purchase than any Fantastic Four book that I've read recently. Let's put it that way. Well, yeah, it's enough shade at Dan Slott for one day. We'll be back shortly for the next review, which is going to be Empire #2. But I got to read that first, so I'll let you guys know, kind of I'll post it on stream about when that's going to be. But, we'll say probably around 5:30 or so, assuming there's no technical difficulties again like what we experienced last week. And I'll see you guys next time here on Comic Island. Oops. Oh no. I didn't time it out.